All right. Hello, brothers. How are you doing today? So, we're going back to the old school. I was going to use the UVMX, but, that software is a little bit complicated and it kept on crashing. So, we're going to get back into this. Hopefully, everybody can hear me. Let me go and check the comments. All right. I'm live. All right, brothers. Sorry about the, because I value your time. All right. So it's value your time. So please excuse my tardiness. So I'll get into it, and I'm not going to keep you long. About an hour. That's it, and you guys can get into the game, and you can replay this while you watch the game, because I know you guys don't watch the game with the volume on, because one, you don't want to listen to the annoying reporters trying to influence you on what you should be watching and looking for. So, okay. Let's take that down a little bit. Hopefully that's not too loud for you guys. All right, we'll go right there. Okay, so if you guys can hear me, let's get into it. Do you consider me a native? All right, and this is by Isabel Berzens. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Interesting book. We're going to what chapter? We are actually going to. This is an interesting book. So it talks about different Native American movements briefly, and it also talks about the connection to American Indian history as it pertains to their intertwining with government and also with government based education, things of that nature. So this is an interesting map right here. So you have towards the bottom of California. So this is San Diego County, and you have quite a bit of American Indian communities. You have the Kumeyaay Community College. So you have Sukan, Virjas, Barona, and I believe you have the Ojibwa somewhere in there. Okay. So they talk about in San Diego how a lot of people do not live on reservations anymore. Most of them actually live in urban life. So this is interesting. So you have the Ojibwa. There you go. The Ojibwa, the Comanche. Okay. The Cherokee, the Muskogee, and quite a bit of the Muskogees are so-called black. The Modocs, same thing with that. Okay. The Lakota, the Seneca, the Yucca, the Agola, the Eskimo. All right, let me take that down a little bit because it's a little loud. All right, hopefully you guys aren't being blasted with the music. All right, so let's go on down. So this talks about this talks a little bit about NASA. So NASA basically, let me show you what they did. They basically put a room together with that was supposed to be for so-called American Indians. So you have a Native community is much more complex than we may think. Rebecca, a Black Native American, and she used to go to a former UCSD, that's University of San Diego, and former NASA member. All right, so let's see what she says. Community and a safe space for Native students on campus. Additionally, we strive to build relations with Native communities in San Diego, California, and nationwide. During my many visits to campus, I explored several of its facilities, including a bookstore, library, Peterson Hall, NASA's office, Native People Perspective Approach. Okay. Tacit knowledge. So this is what, upon entering NASA's office the first time, I noticed that I had a appearance one would think intertribal resource center that would have, namely, a room filled with Native American paintings, maps, objects, regalia, books, spreads, and so on. So here's the image right there. Straight across the doorway, there is a bookcase stacked with books about several different topics, namely historical information about certain tribes, medicine, storytelling, AIM, which is an acronym, American Indian, Red Power, Resurgence, Identity and Culture, okay, reservations in San Diego, I'm going to college, written above. Okay. In the far corner of the room, there is a quite elaborate cartographic map produced by the National Geographic Museum. Various tribes that existed in North and Central America, which it's not very detailed. Hanging the door is a circular Sioux standing rock balance wheel. Okay. Further objects see Navajo spreads covering the couches, as well as beaded bracelets, bungles, and sage tribal sticks and feathers and horns. All right. So there you go. There's the image of that. Okay. From the outset, all these books, images, objects from diverse tribes gives the impression that NASA is an organization that is informed and quite varied in cultural history and approach. All the members are furthermore more distinct backgrounds as well, varying from Comanche to Cherokee to Ojibwa to Modoc to Peoria to Navajo, Muskogee and Inuit and Eskimo. Even though there is a variety, organization also strives to be seen as one community. For Native sovereignty, this exercising of sovereignty, seeing representing themselves as united front, establishing relations with other Native communities as part whole. So, okay, Native culture discourse is centralized by themselves or others. So, interesting. So we keep on going down. All right. So this, with the UCSD, you have several tribes that didn't actually like what UCSD did. So San Diego, the college basically stole native land. They encroached upon it, and they just flat out stole it. It was actually held by an industrialist who basically sold off their land to UCSD and did not compensate them. Okay, so we'll go into what she said. Secondly, NASA have been working very hard to garner more Native American students with UCSD. Several issues work against them. Basically, there are no Native American graduate, undergraduate, or minor studies at UCSD. Moreover, there are hardly any scholarships for Native, although it has been worked on quite extensively. The Kumeyaay have been in the long-standing feud with UCSD, seen as anthropologists have hijacked an ancient burial site on campus, which the Kumeyaay claim to be theirs. This in turn has resulted in a very unstable relationship between NASA and Kumeyaay tribal members. One of NASA's member UCSD Native students, as far as anyone knows, are from the Kumeyaay tribe because they feel extremely disrespected, discriminated against. Hence, they usually attend Sukan Kumeyaay Community College. This makes images such as several t-shirts hanging in the ITRC seem quite ironic. So, UCSD, one of the few universities in Southern California that offers none of these programs. San Diego State University and University of California, Los Angeles are both examples of universities with exemplary Native American studies and facilities, as well as Kumeyaay Community College and Sukan reservations. So, many books regarding natives and photographs of activities and livelihoods. Moreover, many books regarding locals as well as natives and their tribes can be found at UCSD's extensive library. On the other hand, bookstores on the campus only holds a total of 2 books about natives because they don't want you knowing about what those natives really did and what they look like. UCSD does little to change that. After several conversations with NASA students, I realized that many of the non-native UCSD, we'll just say San Diego, because I'm sick of that acronym. Students also hardly know there are natives at this school in the area. Okay, so interesting. So we want to stay on this chapter. Let's see, we go down to this chapter. Yeah, here we go. I found it quite interesting to see how Hassan claims to be native but feels no type of affiliation to native community. This is chapter above. My grandmother sometimes sends me text messages with some mumbo jumbo I don't understand from her native language, but I don't really do much, with that part of my background. So, according to Carlos and David, there are many more people who feel the same way. This can be linked to 3 strategies. Wormer describes the Indios, the mestizos came up as a reaction to national integration and assimilation, namely entry, meant by integrating into the majority and participating in modern state. Here is where we can also detect a form of de-traditional nationalization, where the younger generation is simply not as interested anymore. So you have the Navajo Nation who grew up on reservations in Arizona, but currently reside in San Diego. Okay. And some of them aren't really indigenous. They're actually so-called white people pretending to be. So they really could care less about it. Some of them are just grifters that came into different indigenous groups. All right. It is what is some black too from over in from Europe that came over, but I digress. So, and it talks a little bit about the schooling. All right. So, and let's go on to the next book. Let's stop sharing for a second. All right. And let's go on to the next book. And let's see what it says. So, for the most part, what they discuss in that is that many of the educational system, and I think this book actually covers the educational system, but if not, we'll just go forward to the next book. All right. So basically what they were saying in that was that there's a reason why many of the so-called American Indians do not actually attend some universities. Sometimes they can't get funding. Sometimes they have feuds with different universities, like at LSU's campus. You have a mound, and you have Poverty Point, and you have different mound builder societies that existed throughout that area. And some of them are actually very disgusted that LSU built their campus on their ceremonial and their burial sites. And you can actually see placards that they try to put in place to actually bring attention to the different civilization that existed in southern Louisiana at the time. Let's go back to sharing. All right. So it's ready to go. Okay. All right, here we go. So this is Ohio. Let me pull that up. Hold on. Go to the banner. There we go. Show. Show? No. All right. I messed up. It's been a while, guys. So this is Ohio Valley Native Americans Speak. Paul Rene Tambora. It's supposed to scroll from the bottom. I messed up. So let me redo that. Okay. Okay. So it's been a while, guys. Please excuse me. So this is chapter 4, symbolic forms and transformation. All right. Language, song, and dance are examples of symbolic forms and show the way a performance influences identity, much as the Ohio Valley has been without American Indian specific expressions. Okay, so it talks about the Fraternal Order of Redmond Lodges, Boy Scouting, Buffalo Bills, 19th century. One gauge to measure identity has been the degree of which indigenous language has been retained. This reflects the belief that culture and language are inseparably linked, and if language is not saved, the culture would die, which is true. However, language and identity are tied to more than language proficiency and is seen to be embodied by a broader conceptualization of culture. Even when speaking English or French, knowing how to speak one's Aboriginal language is a key component to one's sense of identity, but is it the sole detriment? So, you have the Ohio Valley as to understanding a part of Native American identity. You have the Shawnee, the Cherokee, the Mingo, etc. Some of these are in the 5 civilized tribes, some are not. And there are 300,000 speakers of 148 different native languages in North America, but most are small. A small percentage of fluent speakers, the Dean, Navajo, Inuit, Eskimo, Cree, and Ojibwa, are the only large group showing enough strength to make it through the next 21st century. I agree. Ways of speaking English have often developed in communities maintain identity function of language. This has led to recent studies of Indian English, which they use home, on the job, and other areas of daily experience. That's called code switching. So you actually merge different languages together, and you have that often in your so-called Black populations, where they'll drop their R's, they'll roll their E's, they'll use different pronouns to actually describe different people, the use of nicknames, things of that nature. So it's called Indian English. However, words are used in specific ways, which are becoming a new code for indexing Native American culture, similar to the way African American, looking on that, communities do, because quite a bit of your so-called African, which is a misnomer, Americans are actually American Indian. Since language is tied intimately to ethnic identity, the linguistic cues may either develop or maintain to reinforce this different identity. This linguistic difference could both be maintained and reinforced through past mixed language pidgins, or forms of Indian English. And pidgin is like a broken English. So they was, oh, he's speaking pidgin English. It's like a broken English or a mixture of another language within English. But I digress. Alternately, since the Indian English has not been maintained to develop from community of separate language culture in Ohio Valley, new forms of language may be developing. A parallel example of this is found, there you go, again in African American, another misnomer, vernacular AAVE. Okay. The Ohio Valley, I found that African mixed native descent people, there you go, they're actually getting somewhat right. I don't know about African, often use words, indigenous languages, and different discourse styles in the same way European mixed native people did. Oh, okay. Distinguish the identity from other white and Black people. All right. The need to research is also addressed a small amount of research done specifically in minority language and social, linguistic, and community or communication studies. Okay. So I maintain a belief that language is related to the fundamental way of the worldview. Yes. And also what you value within your culture is displayed within your language, your music, your arts, etc. Now, you do have some people that control those things to actually shape the narrative of how they want people to view you through, I guess you would say, social engineering and brainwashing. So you have to be careful with your words and your images that are placed out there. So let's keep on going. So during interviews and observation, many Ohio Valley natives claim an American Indian language and express hope for instructing of it. Specifically, classes of tapes, learning in order, as several said, to be more reflexively bring it back. However, in practice, I saw only a few small attempts by participants to actually learn language. Well, yeah, some of them, it's just like when you have different generations that are here in America, they lose their ability to understand the native language. So a Chinese person will start caring less about their Hun, or their Mandarin, or what's the other one? You have Mandarin, and you also have dang, they have two languages that are dominant in China, but they'll forget that after a couple of generations. I don't want to learn that stuff, man. That's my granddad's language. I don't want to learn that. I'm American, because they have officially assimilated. The Anishinaabe, Lakota, and Cherokee. A few words used for harder to find languages like Mingo and Shawnee. Very few languages are offered at colleges and universities in Ohio Valley. Northern Kentucky University incorporates some Ohio Valley languages into its Native Studies program. And Miami University has a Miami language program. The large universities in the region only offer language. First Nations distance. Okay. Powwows, especially from, powwows actually originated in the Northeastern. So they were brought over to California, but it was not a California practice, but they'll actually discuss this in another book. All right. So they display dance and dress. All right. So New Hampshire, Maine, a few. Recently I heard in British Columbia. In all of these cases, the speakers were not Lakota and represented a number of nations, including Makah, Salish, Cherokee, Potawatomi, Benike, Shaswape, and Cree. One book written by Mary Elizabeth Thunder is a very good example of the Ohio Valley connection to the Lakota. And it's a decent book. I'll probably read that one day. So, examples include Wakanata, which means God or holy mystery. And that sounds a lot like Wakanda. And we'll get into Wakanda in a second. That is actually a Lakota word. Wasti. Let me check to see what the comments are saying. All right, cool. So, did all that, and okay. So Wasti, good. Kola, friend. Tukansila, grandfather. Sunkamanda, horse. Kanupa or Kanupa, pipe. Also, some words were used for food. Walakawupai, fried bread. Oops. Wagalipui, excuse me. Wajipwa, fruit soup. Okay. And Wakalapi, coffee. And they often use black medicine for coffee, just like they use sweetgrass, which is what the Crees actually call weed. Okay. And other tribes call weed like they don't actually smoke it, so they actually eat it. The old term Zuasapa, black, there you go, which must have been learned from reading books of old days. All right. So borrowing continues and seems to have added strength given to this method as less of the Lakota people speak the language. Yeah, that's true. Shawnee's fluent speakers in Oklahoma for correct pronunciations of the word. He developed a series of lessons of Shawnee's language. So Shawnees were actually forced from out of the Ohio Valley. Some still are in Kentucky, but most were forced to Oklahoma. Interesting, and I think I have something on that. There are also Ojibwa and Cherokee classes offered in parts of Ohio Valley. It's very rare. One example of Indian talk is the use of in it. In it. Isn't that cool? In that worse? Okay. So it's often used as Southern vernacular. So let's say, in it, ain't that cool? Isn't that right? Yeah, that is. All right. So, yeah, I shouldn't be making fun of a lot of Southerners and their slang words, because some of them actually connect to ancient history. In Western states, I've heard in it used alone to emphasize a point. Basically, it serves as a question or search for a consensus or agreement, as more English ain't it, but it serves as a purpose as well. Just like mm-hmm. Mm-hmm is not a European phrase or term. When someone says mm-hmm, that's actually Indian. So that is not something that derived from Europe or from your Black Welsh, your Black Irish. It's actually unique to Americas. It marks the speaker as a native. Also, can be used as a courage of a more lighthearted friendliness. Many times after her in it, there will be a short chuckle among the speech and participants. In Ohio Valley, Indian folks uh, now live in the Midwest or Indian hobbyists who spent time out west who seem to recognize or use it. Ohio Valley Native communities seem unaware of this tag. Another example of Native communication competence that's understood generally in western parts of North America seems not to be understood in Ohio Valley was the term A. And here we go. So hopefully you guys can hear this. If not, I will leave this link. All right, so let's put that volume up. Okay, so let's try this. Hopefully you guys can hear.
Get this camera here. It's not more like a prank, it's more of like a reaction video, y'all. Basically what I'm about to be doing is I'm about to be distracting Corn while he works out. We just gonna catch Corn's reaction on camera. Stay tuned. Make sure y'all spam the comment section, team, like subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Without further ado, we're gonna get straight into it. Don't mind my hair, but whatever, y'all. Stay tuned, let's get into it.
If not, I'll just leave the video. She said A at the end, which so when they say the tagline of A or IE, sometimes depending on where they are in the South, whatever tribe they're from, they'll say A or IE. All right. And that basically, as you heard her say, she's from Alabama. Okay. So she more than likely is a mixture of different tribes. So you have the the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, and I have a map that all are in Alabama. You also have a few Crees because you had the movement of the Virginias, and they actually settled down in Alabama. So quite a bit of your natives of Alabama are actually from Virginia. Just saying. The tag was used after a statement meaning "I'm only joking" or "gotcha." I tried telling some jokes from my years living in Western Indian communities and found no recognition among Ohio Valley Native people when the punchline IE or AE was added. Another example of Native specific words is drum, used to encompass an instrument and singers. He is a member of that drum. The term is used in Ohio Valley, but those who have been socialized in more generic pan-Indian style of powwow speech to Ohio Valley natives are not regulars of powwows and do not use these terms. Okay, so again, okay, and this goes into a conversation with a Shawnee man from Kentucky. Remember, I told you the Shawnee are in Kentucky. You have several high schools that are named Shawnee in Kentucky, and we will get into and you want to read this, you guys can go into that on your own. All right. So here we go. Code switching occurs in speech different dialects of English and often serves as a marker of a different ethnic identity. So African American, again, another misnomer, vernacular, reports that it is diverging from standard English rather than converging towards it. And this is due to increasing willingness to identify as separate from SE. Language codes may provide some function in Native community, but in Ohio Valley, there has not been enough time to see separate community dialect. And accompanying words and indexes. So let's pull this up. Specific to powwows, drum. After powwow, I'm going to 49 until doing's done. Many be said that either Ohio or Kentucky accent, but it's specifically native Ohioan, meaning that I'm going to drum and sing in regular clothes, not powwow or ceremonial tonight with a bunch of guys and gals around. So it includes cooking, ceremony, camp life, and other aspects. Many native people of the Ohio Valley have never had the opportunity to hear words from the actual language of the tribes they claim membership in. Many languages of interest in Ohio Valley, such as Cherokee, Abenaki, Delaware, etc. So let's go scroll on down. All right. All right, scrolling. So for the most part, this actually breaks into the book Mathura Grandchildren, the Shawnee, 1994, provides an example of using native words in a structurally English manner. For the Algonquins, it is easy to recognize Coca Mathra, Marthina as our grandmother, but use in English other native words. And here's the native survey. So this is really cool. So this is some of the native words. So middle-aged woman in Shawnee, Cherokee, Ohio, Cherokee, Lakota, Lenape, and Shawnee. Hello is Osio. So they compare and contrast different age groups and different tribes and see similarities. So Cherokee, good morning. Osio, thank you. Wado, which means water. What are you doing? Okay, that's Cherokee, Wado. So oftentimes people think that they were saying water, but they were saying Wado or thank you. Niue, Shawnee, Waguchi, Ojibwa. Elderly woman, Cherokee and Shawnee from Ohio. Hello, Pashalo, Shawnee, thank you. Nawe, Niyawa, Shawnee. Animal, Washita. Elderly man, Shawnee from Indiana. Goodbye. Pasalo, take care. Rishishi, Katishi, good day. Thanks, Niyawa. Kiweko Alea Nia Hawia Katiso. Hello, my friend, what is your name? He could identify members of different groups and numbers up to 3, Shawnee, with some trouble. Foods, 10 or 20 or more, including Mishimana, apple, pecan, nut, or newt, Nibi, water. Animals, he knew 10 or 20. Mostly they're the ones that he hunted for the most part. So Makwa, bear. Middle-aged man from Kentucky, a Cherokee, Shawnee. So, of course, Asio. And thank you, Wado, Cherokee. And this is Lakota woman from Ohio. Hello, Lakota. How? Thank you, Pilami, Lakota. And she was self-taught. So, young man, Algonquin. Hello, Bazoo, Benzo. Ani, hello, Bimapi, Tanika. Good morning, Geechee Wapani. And you have the Geechees or the Gullas of South Carolina. Thank you, Magwet, Nui. Animals, Wasin, Mawa, Wapiti, Banash. Others took time to share. All the words are Ojibwa. Elderly man, Shawnee, also names Sulo definition until we meet again. Hello, goodbye. Kimawo, Shawnee. Young woman, Iroquois, Seneca, Shawnee. Thank you. Genayo, Seneca. Middle-aged woman, Shawnee from Michigan. Hello. Kiwi Kamali, Shawnee, Pasalo. Bazoo, Bamapi, Kamwimbi, all Ojibwa. Thank you. Nawi, Shawnee, Wado, Megwet. Bishek, Nesh, Sway, Niwan, Nude, Yong. Mijim. Rabbit, Wabishi, deer, Migas. This is what they usually hunted. Eagle. Well, that's a spiritual entity. They mostly saw in the eagle, per se. Let's scroll on down. Okay. So you have the Ohio Valley. The concept described a power is given that music is part of natural order and occupying a niche of natural universe with human-like capacity to be born and to die, to undergo changes, to be renewed. The term Vatum means several things. Now, what we're doing is we're switching over to a new page. We got loaded. So, for the most part, you have some similarities where some tribes that came into contact with each other, they actually carry linguistic cues, languages, and words. So you have Lakotas that will know Cherokee enough to where they can actually confer and communicate with them. So they'll say Osio, okay, which means hello. All right. And Lakotas, their origins are in the Ohio Valley, and they also are in North Dakota and South Dakota. That's why they're called the Dakotas. So, okay, let's see how long this is going to load. Now, I was supposed to actually put the American Indians chapter 6 in scroll, but at the end of the day, it's been a while since I used this, so I'm rusty. All right, it is what it is. We can't all be perfect. I'm not Rey from Star Wars. I can't just come out the womb perfect. Can do everything. I'm not her. All right. So let's keep it moving. All right. And here it is. American Indians and their first encounters. So, distinct cultural groups with anthropologists call cultural areas, the Great Plains. So, a lot of these coastal regions, for the most part, they were actually patriarchal, not matriarchal. So, and some of the tribes inside of them, there's a lot of tribes. So, they're generalizing. So, the rich, fertile soils, okay, but there are matriarchal, and there were mostly patriarchal, all right? So 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminole. And a lot of the Seminole tribes were not included because some of them actually left and went to Mexico. Some of them became Army Scouts. Some of them were forced out of their indigenous lands. All right, and we showed you pictures of Seminoles. Let's see where we at. The Mississippian pattern: sedentary farmers lived in fortified towns and watercourses. Okay. So they did have a political system, and they often, many of your native indigenous tribes actually form your confederacies. So your confederations are actually connected to American Indian history. And it was adopted by the Europeans because it was so effective. Neither may be. Let's go on to the next one. Because the men were mostly hunting and fishing, and the women actually did the gardening and the agriculture. So you have different European groups that came in and thought that the men were lazy, but they just have defined roles. All right. So you have all male war chief councils. All right. So let's move on. Let's move to the next one. So next would be the northeastern woodlands. So that would be the Atlantic Ocean, the Mississippi River, and the Ohio River north of western Ontario and Manitoba. It reflects its cultural diversity, and north central tribes relied on wild rice and coastal hunting and gathering tribes. They farmed, and the Iroquois and Huron supplemented farming with hunting and gathering. Because of the cold seasons, it gets doggone near negative degrees every winter. They can't farm. So the Iroquois and the intrusive linguistic wedge extended north into otherwise all Algonquin-speaking areas along the lower eastern Great Lakes. Okay, so you have Haudenosaunee, Longhouse people, the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, originally established for mutual protection by cultural heroes, Denigua and Hiawatha. Okay, so they had peace chiefs elected by women of their clans. All right, because these were matriarchal, some of them. The Algonquins, northern Algonquin-speaking tribes in New England, North Atlantic Slope, a zone transition between farming, hunting, and fishing, wild rice, hunting. The men also fished, the women gathered wild plants. Okay, dependence on food collected in boreal environments of scarce resource necessitated a lifestyle independence and autonomy in isolation. Men hunted, they went to battle, life and activities corresponded. The pattern shifted, and settlements actually during different periods. The male success in life depended on lifelong supernatural and obtained through vision quest at puberty. Usually like 5 days, 4 or 5 days, where they actually fast and they go and they actually get visions from their gods. Many tribes didn't believe in supernatural or visions, but this one did. The Great Plains, and some of those tribes are actually the Mohegans. So you have the Mohegans, and I believe we did something on the Mohegans, but not here. And you want to see that, you got to go elsewhere. And we talked about their different gods and what they believe in. So they have sun gods and things of that nature. But which is why they call them the Connecticut Sun. And Mohegans are so-called Blackwood Marsh Bar. The large tree subhuman of the Seminary Plains extended to Rockies and Mississippi River in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So the buffalo hunters, okay, we discussed that, okay. And you will also see in different things that will bring up the buffalo hunters when you had settlement of different colonial empires. In order to kill off some of the tribes, they actually killed off the buffalo also. So they couldn't have hunting and food sources. So they would have to be dependent on Europeans for food on their reservations and things of that nature. Okay, men achieve status and prestige through war. Honors earned by counting coup, taking something, guns, scalps, horses from the enemy. Okay, war honors that included a man's claim to war honors was validated by comrades in victory celebrations. The war bonnets actually worn members of the military society. Okay, so for the most part, they were actually patriarchal. So we're going down to the southwest. So the Anasazi, the Spanish called the descendants of the Anasazi Pueblo because of the house they lived in. The term Pueblo means like houses or towns. The small eastern pueblos of Rio Grande actually is where they were located. So let's go down. Pueblo villages were permanent, compact clusters of multi-story structures, kivas. Okay, they made wheat, alfalfa, and fruit trees. All right. Among the kinships, they for the most part patriarchal. So we've got the Navajo and Apache. Then we're going on to the Pimas. All right, look, stop. The Pimas were patrilineal extended families. So culturally, the Sonora Desert was dominated by the Pima speaking. The Pimas and the Tuhu Papago believed in many things, but both the Pimas, they had the men hunted, I guess, deer, and you have the headmen or oversee peace and war, as well as moral leaders known as keepers of smoke. Okay, positions were based on charisma and were hereditary and patrilineal line along the Pima. Okay, so the Rancheras, which is farmer village, it's a farmer village settlement tribe near the Colorado River. The Yaviva, Havaspita, Mojave, Kishan, and Yuma, the Ranchera people, they actually had a mixed economy: hunting, gathering, fishing, farming. And it was usually connected to where the water supply was, and they're patrilineal also. So the Mojave and Yuma were patrilineal. Okay. And the Ranchera peoples believed they had little control over the supernatural. So you had some tribes that were like, we don't really believe in that hokey pokey stuff and this and that. You know, we're more pragmatic. They often tend to be more warlike, and they had to hunt for most of their stuff because there was a scarcity of food sources. Whereas I think that other tribes that are near very abundant areas, they tend to delve into more of the supernatural because they had an abundance. So they had time to focus on the philosophical and the spiritual. So the shamans were the ones that cured, illnesses from witchcraft and things like that. They did have some belief in it. So you have the California Great Basin Plateau, and so you had the Sierra Nevada area, the Colorado, the canyons, Cali, north and south. Okay, so some were nomadic because California is a big desert. It's huge and desertous. You do have some wooded areas in California, but for the most part, California is like a big, dry place. That's why they don't have many mosquitoes in that area. Like I had a relative that never actually experienced mosquitoes until they went back down south. And it's like, man, what are these things? Like, they're mosquitoes. Man, we don't have those here where I'm from. It's like, where are you from? LA? It's all right. They have flies and homeless, but not mosquitoes. Most of the present state of California from the western slopes, okay, like the different tribes, they did have skirmishes, there were wars, and they had a unique series of different gods and goddesses and folklore, and some things actually translated over to Mexico. So you had Khalifa, and she was actually in Mexican folklore. They actually have a reference to Khalifa, which was Lower California. And if you guys want to know about that, you can actually look up Khalifa, Khalifa. It was a Queen Khalifa, and it's actually in their folklore and history, and you have to actually do your due diligence. But quite a bit of these tribes, because they're just generalizing, but they're just giving you some of the tribes within this book that were patriarchal and matriarchal. But you will find that most of the 5 civilized tribes that were included were mostly matriarchal, because at the end of the day, they would prefer you. And we read this in, what is it? The White Woman and Race book. And I have that somewhere, but I'll get back to you on that. And she was in conflict with her man. Okay, she was fighting with her man for power, and she wanted to be seen as an equal to him. Okay, so in essence, she was seeing herself as masculine, as he was seeing himself as masculine. So every other subculture underneath should be feminine. So she wanted to share power with him. So, but if I can't remember the name of that book, I'll put it below. So for the most part, that's their issue. That's their battle that they have with each other. And she'll use feminism. And most of your feminists are actually men. Your staunch feminists are men. So don't look at a feminist as a woman. It's a man and woman working together. So we're going up to the top, and we're looking at Historical Dictionary of Native American Movements by Raymond Wilson. It's a very interesting picture. Here it is. Guess who this is? Guess. Go ahead. Take your time. It's an important person. I mean, you may not guess who it is because they look kind of white, and they've always liked to whitenize those images. There you go. Pocahontas. And what you see is an occult hand gesture, and it deals with secret societies in Europe. That's not a normal hand. I'll go into what that is in some other video, but this is not the time for that. Okay? That's Pocahontas, supposedly. Well, she's been whitenized. Just like in a couple hundred years, if you see me become super successful, they're going to make me out to be a 6-foot-tall, blonde-haired white guy with green eyes. I do not have green eyes. I am not blonde. I do not have white skin. I'm a brown-skinned brother. Okay? I'm far from being white. Far from it. If you see me walk down the street, you will confuse me for a slightly tall Wesley Snipes over a white guy. You will not confuse me for a white guy. I'm sorry. That's one thing that's not going to occur. So here's a map, and it's of different Native American movements. So you have the Pequot Open Fox Wood Casino in 1992, and that's in Connecticut. Okay, so that's near, I guess you would say, it's the Pequots, and the Pequots in Connecticut are also close to Mohegans. I believe there's Mohegan. Is there a Mohegan Casino also? St. Regis, New York International Bridge Blockade. The Trail of Broken Treaties in 72. That was actually a guy that he raised some money. I believe he got $60,000, and he drove around in a van to bring awareness of all the breach treaties that had occurred. It was interesting protest. I think this in this yeah, it's in this book. But you guys want me to go into it? I can go into it, but let's keep it moving. Right. You got Detroit, Michigan, Pontiac Rebellion in 1763. We discussed that with Tecumseh. If you look at the river and you just look at a map and you go across Detroit River, you will actually see Tecumseh on Canada's side. Tecumseh was a individual that was betrayed by the British, who were supposed to back him up. That's number 4 right there. So it's right there. It's on the opposite side of the river. And he was led into slaughter because he wasn't supported. And the British and French had handshake deals. They weren't really at war. They were trying to scope the American landscape up. So they worked together. They're like brothers with that have a little skirmish from time to time. But the British basically didn't back up Tecumseh, and they led him to slaughter by engaging in war with the French. So there you go. So you have the movement of Tecumseh and the Prophet. So Tecumseh had a brother, and they put together a religious or spiritual movement, which they want to divert away from American spiritual systems, Christianity, things of that nature. It didn't succeed. Okay. So let's move on. So these are some of the things that occurred. Let's move on. All right. So very interesting. So you can see some of these things. If you want, you can just screenshot this, and you can then take the screenshot and you can go to each one of these things. These are some of the movements. Oh, the Ghost Dance. Yeah. There's actually a rapper named Ghost Dance, and Ghost Dance is not so much of what dance is. It is a dance, but it deals with war. It deals with war. It's very interesting. I might see if that's there. The Alcatraz Island, California, occupation of Alcatraz. Whoa, that I didn't know. That's actually inaccurate, the map. It needs to be up a little bit higher because San Francisco is all the way up towards the bay. Shouts out to my Oakland sisters and brothers. We got love for you in the D. So basically, with the Alcatraz, any unused federal lands or buildings can be taken possession by different native indigenous tribes. So that's what they did. They occupied the vacant Alcatraz, which was like in 6970, if I can remember. Yep, let's see, is it 6970? Go down. Yep, there you go. Whatever. I wasn't alive then, so I have to memorize all this stuff from reading. So, you guys that were like, yeah, it was 69, yeah, 6'9", not like the rapper. Yes, basically, they can actually take possession of vacant federal buildings or property. And we'll get into this a little bit later. You guys are going to like the little twist that I have and information that you may not be privy to. Moving on. All right. Okay. I don't really know much about the Washington State Fish-ins, but that's something I can study later. Okay. So this is just a breaking down of history, chronology. So it talks about the mound builders, specifically the Mississippi Valley. It talks about the Poverty Point in Louisiana. Okay. All right. You have LSU that actually has Indian burial mounds. And you have a lot of your mounds were destroyed by railroad companies and by European powers. And some of the mounds were looted, and the antiquities were shipped over to Europe. Some of the mummies that were shipped over were turned to fuel for the train systems because they desecrated that area. Some were used for litany of different health benefits, which really didn't do anything. So Anasazi culture reaches zenith in 900 to 1300, and I believe they went into drought, but they were believers in aliens that came and gave them wisdom and history. So they actually had paintings in caves, and they also did things where they put their history on clay tablets. Really interesting. You have the Chaco Canyon in northwest New Mexico in 1100. There you go. Severe drought disrupts the Indian societies in 1300. In 1300, droughts and enemy raids prompted Anasazi to abandon cliff towns. There you go. See? All right. So some things I do remember. Okay, Iroquois Great League of Peace forms, the Huron Confederacy forms. A lot of your confederacies borrowed heavily from these Indian Confederates and their constitutions. Just saying. The Apaches and Navajos arrive in the Southwest. Okay, then it goes into the Giovanni de Verrazano travels north of the Atlantic. And you have some information in here where they leave some things out, but there's a really good books of different diaries that were written from the first contact from Europeans, and it's held. And you will not be able to see it until you go over to those countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, etc. And they'll show you these books. And you'll be shocked by how they describe the Brazilians, the El Salvadorians, how they describe the Panamanians. You will be shocked, so-called black man, because most of them will start describing men that look like you. So, Powhatan Indians clash with English in Virginia. Okay, 1622. This is a nice little timeline. Let's keep on scrolling down so you guys can read the different incidents that happened. The Pequot War in the late 1600s actually came into existence. Then you have the Tuscarora War. And the Tuscaroras, so-called black. I think I have a picture. Nope. 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 Where you at? Hold on. Yep, that's it. This is an image of what the Tuscaroras in North Carolina look like. So-called brothers. Okay. Got the little feathers on their hair. Some of them had their hair dreaded. Some had it braided. Okay. But do they look white? These are the Tuscaroras of North Carolina. And they're still there. They're still there. They're still there. Dude looks like Lawrence Taylor. 1711 to 1713. Okay. And this is the image where it comes from. So you have the Tuscarora War. So just in case you guys think I'm fabricating this stuff, you know, you can go on YouTube or Bing. You can actually go in different sources and find the stuff. So that's the image right there. All right. So that's the brother right there. All right. All right. See the brother back there in the back? Yep. There you go. See, they always try to lighten the images and try to make them white, but there you go. You gotta dodge a hijack. You know, shouts out to my boy that says it. All right, so this is the image that I just blew up in the other page. All right. Pull up. There you go. That's the image. There you go. Getting back. The Muskegee Wars, and then the Yamasee War. Now you have some women that actually still use Yamasee in their name, so they really Yamanika, Yamasina. They're actually paying homage and tribute to their tribe. Okay, there's actually a comedian that Patrice O'Neal actually just roasted back when he had Black Phillip, and her name was Yamanika. Okay, and guess where she's from? The South. Her family is, and you also have the Gullas in South Carolina. But yeah. All right. So the Tuscaroras migrate. They had to, and the Natchez uprising occurs in the French in Louisiana. So Natchez is
Some of them moved to Tennessee because, again, they would do trades and they would travel different places. They weren't nomadic. You don't define different American Indian groups just by a geographical region. They didn't stick in just one area. They actually went and traded everywhere. So famous Natchez is, what's that chick with the terrible looking nose? But she can sing, Tina Turner. That crazy chick. She got the weirdest looking nose ever, man. Jeez. Wow. Okay. So yeah, the King George War in 1748. The Choctaw Civil War takes place in 1750. And some of these wars lead up to the American Revolution. And she had so many different wars and conflicts. Remember when I actually had the miscellaneous war? I did not include Native American wars, military miscellany. It was a long time ago, that video. So some of these led to the beginning of the American Revolution because they were warring so much against these different British, French, Spanish powers that they had to actually fight them. They did, and some chose different sides. Okay, so Russian traders entered the Aleutian Island and enslaved the Aleuts. Okay, so when people say, oh, Russians never enslaved me, okay, yeah, okay. The French Indian War or 7-Year War occurs 1754, 1763. The Cherokee War takes place, the French Indian War. Pontiac War occurs in 1763 to 64. Okay, I think I'll go on Fort Stanwix in another video. It's signed. Okay, which cedes Kentucky to the English. So the Franciscans believe their California mission system. Okay, and I'll go into the Franciscans in a later video on some of the things they did, bad and good. All right. So let's move on. The Cherokees begin to migrate to Arkansas and to Missouri. And we'll move on. Let's keep on scrolling down. So there's more important things that I want to discuss. There's a lot of stuff in this book that I want to get into, but I don't want to take 3-4 hours because I got other stuff to do. And I don't want you guys having to sit 3 or 4 hours to get this information. The Treaty of Greenville is signed, ceding much of Ohio to the United States. Yes, the Battle of Fallen Timbers takes place where Anthony Wayne defeats the Western Confederacy of different tribes. In 1803, France loses and the United States obtains the Louisiana Territory from France. Handsome Lake's Longhouse religion begins along the Senecas. So they had religious reformations, much like you had the Reform period where people start converting over from Catholicism to Protestantism. Same thing happened amongst the Indians. So Tecumseh and Tenasquatá attempt to unite eastern tribes using religion. Okay, this is discussed, I think, in this book, but if not, I can discuss if you want me to. They actually want to go back to their native religious belief and to completely abandon white religions, Christianity, Catholicism, etc. Some actually did adopt Judaism. Just saying, not all. Okay, but they did not adopt Judaism. No, they went back to native indigenous religious systems. Others, some did adopt, but not them. Not them. So all those guys that believe in Hebrew Israelites, they didn't believe in that at all. They weren't at all believers of that belief system. Just saying. So American Fur Company at the Bighorn River. So Manuel Lisa. Okay, probably a fake last name, possibly a crypto Jew, because no one names their last name Lisa. That is not a general name that comes from Europe. It's 2 first names. So you gotta look into him. Red Stick War occurs in 1813. The First Seminole War takes place. This is that wasn't their first war, but okay. I think they got that wrong. But it's neither here nor there. The United States acquires Florida when signing the Adams-Onis Treaty. Sequoyah formulates the Cherokee syllabary. starts the Santa Fe Trade, 1814. 1821, excuse me. And then you have 1824, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is created. And they breached so many agreements and treaties. Okay, so many. In 1827, Wisconsin Ho-Chunk takes place. Cherokee Nation versus Georgia defines tribes as domestic, dependent nations. And Worcester versus Georgia. State laws have no force in Indian country. The Black Hawk War is fought in Illinois and Wisconsin. This was breached. Several times, these different laws or precedents were breached. Okay, and most of your Georgian residents actually came over. We discussed this in White Trash book. They came over as criminals, prisoners, and they had to work as slaves. Okay, so we discussed this and how you had the North Carolina government that was set up, and they had established slavery. So you had tobacco that was used as a main cash crop, and in Georgia they wanted to set this up as a free state. However, the residents didn't want to do the labor, so they end up bringing in white slaves, indentured bonds, and just straight up as prisoners. All right, straight up. And they did not get free when they got to a certain age. They were prisoners. All right, and we discussed the different people that were involved in it. But let's go on. The Second Seminole War occurs 1835 to 42. Okay, Creek removal of Indian territory takes place in 36. The Cherokee were removed from Georgia along the Trail of Tears, 1838. The Wildcat, 1845, leads part of the Seminole Nation to Mexico. Remember how I told you how they like British humor is long form jokes, inside jokes. So when you watch football, Florida State, they go into the Wildcat. Okay, this is something where they like to poke fun and jab at you, so-called black man, with your history and you don't know it. So the Wildcat formation is when the quarterback scrambles and he runs. You see how they like to just dig in and poke fun at you, and who is mostly in Wildcat? Black quarterbacks. You get it, guys? It ain't funny, but it's funny. If you know, you know. The Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo transfers the Southwest from Mexico to the United States. The Pueblos attack Americas and the Taos revolt. And the California Gold Rush occurs, decimating Indian property, 1848. So that's why you have the 49ers. Many of you guys know this. So you had a lot of Europeans that came out. Oh, and one good thing about 1849 for you brothers in SYSBM, a lot of women that were not allowed to actually marry outside of their ethnic group, whether they be Chinese, whether they be American Indian, whether they be white, whether they be, because it was a expansion state, whether they be colored, or whether they be what have you. They could actually marry whoever they wanted because there was such a shortage of women out west. And they hadn't established a lot of those miscegenation laws within those areas. They weren't as truly grounded, okay, as they were in the South and mostly in the East Coast. So this was a period where a lot of wealth was generated. Unfortunately, it did not go to many of the native tribes, but anybody could come out there and make a fortune, and marriage occurred. So to this day, you have a lot of people in that Northern Cali region that trace their wealth and ancestry to that period. So a lot of people, you have a lot of unique looking people in that Northern Cali region that you never know. You never know. They might be passing. But never push away someone that could be an ally just because they don't look like you. All right. So this goes into the Civil War. And you had a lot of wars that occurred in the Civil War. So you had the Sand Creek Massacre that takes place, the Navajo removed, the Bosque Redondo Reservation, the Lone Walk of the Navajos. Okay, so we discussed Red Cloud's War a long time ago. Okay, but a lot of these conflicts were going on, which caused the Civil War. Don't let them lie to you and say the Civil War was just over slavery. It was a little bit deeper than that. All right. And then you have in 1869, Congress terminates treaty making with the Indian tribe. 1871. And you have the Modoc War in California occurs, which is not really discussed much in 1873, 72, 73. Okay, and I think we discussed this in another video about the American Indian Wars, but you know, we shall move on. All right, moving along. All right, okay, and then we have the Lake Mohawk Conference of Friends of the Indian. It established in Lake Mohawk, New York. So the Lake Mohawk Conference of Friends of the Indian. This came previous to the Mohawk Conference for the Negro, because they're one and the same. Most of the stratagems that they used for the so-called Negro or colored was the same thing they established earlier with the Indians. The same. So, by the way, this is had to be re-recorded due to the fact that when I actually pulled this up, it actually trashed my audio intentionally. So, YouTube playing games as per the usual. So this is actually the Mohawk Conference for the American Indian. Okay. And they had several of these all the way up until the 20s, possibly. So you guys can read this, and I believe I'm going to maximize right there. Okay. So let's start off at the top. With some, this is page 16. With some advantage and much disadvantage to the Indians, it has not been a success. Though leasing the tribal lands has been more successful than of individual allotments. The time limit, let me take a sip of water. Okay. Some, and let me move that out the way. Some of the steadily refused help. Okay. And 22 sections have been added to the Seminole Indian lands in Florida. The Chippewa timberland trouble is in a fair way to be settled. I think we will obtain from Congress a settlement in regard to the unsatisfactory as we can expect, although it is not what we ought to receive by any means. Those people have been suffering greatly. Okay, so this talks about the Chippewas. And by the way, shouts out to I want to say Western Michigan, who are known as the Chippewas. Shouts out to them. You do have Chippewas here in the Ohio Valley and in Michigan. So I met some. They're cool people. All right, Indian Territory. And I believe we'll discuss the Curtis Act in another video. Curtis! Like my main man, Cameron, would say. Curtis! The Interior Department under the Curtis Act has assumed control over all educational matters along the 5 civilized tribes, except the Seminoles, because they actually left and went to Mexico because they weren't going to be enslaved. They're warlike. John L. Benedict in Illinois has been appointed General Superintendent of the Schools of the Indian Territory. Why? Why, Sway? A supervisor of the schools for each nation, E.G. MacArthur of Minnesota. From the Choctaws, Benjamin S. Kopic for the superintendent for the Chicolo or Chillicothe schools. For the Cherokees, Calvin Ballard of Illinois. For the Creeks, John N. Simpson of Wisconsin. Of the Chickasaws, their investigation has developed a deplorable state of affairs. Nepotism. Nepotism basically means that you hire your own family member, your own son or daughter. Incompetency of the school officials and misuse of school funds. Does that not sound familiar? Brett Favre, cough, 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 stealing funds for poor kids. Shouts out to G-Dub. A low grade of scholarship and but little industrial training. Doesn't that sound a lot like the Mohan Conference for the American Negro problem? Okay, that's because they considered them the same. Because they were the same. Okay? That's why they put and other friends. The agreement made. Okay, so the four nations have 24 boarding schools, including orphan asylums, which many medical experimentations grotesquely were done. 365 schools, neighborhood schools. The Seminoles have 2 boarding schools and 2 day schools. The Chickasaw Freemen brothers, all right, I want you to understand this. This talks about you, so-called black men, have no share in the tribal school funds. The Choctaw Freemen only have a very small share, with about 40 to 50,000 white children are almost without schooling. All right, the agreement made by the 5 civilized tribes. So you got Choctaw Freemen and Chickasaw Freemen. Okay, the agreement made between the 5 civilized tribes commissioned with Choctaws and Chickasaws were ratified by these 3 tribes, and the agreement with the Creeks was rejected by them. All right, so does that not sound familiar? This is your history, so-called black man. It's hidden, but it's your history. So oftentimes you have enumerating different things that occur, and it's hidden from you. These things are very, very clever. They try to hide it with terms. They call you black. They call you Negro. They always want to misclassify you every single 10, 20 years. This is your history. This is yours. So we're going to head to the second section of this page. So give me a second. And this is going to, you guys may not have checked this out, but this is going to be the boom moment. Mic drop. Like I'm a doggone battle rapper, you know? I got them bars for you, bro. Okay. Go on to the next section. Go on. So, for the most part, this is hidden from you intentionally. So, and you're going to love this next part. So, come on now. Moving on to the next part. So, the Curtis Act, we will be discussing that in later videos. Not now. So, there's a Choctaw Freeman. Okay. So, let's go. So, hold on one second. Somebody's at my door. I shall be right back. don't know why these Jehovah's Witnesses keep on coming around. It's either Jehovah's Witness or somebody's trying to get you to vote. Democrat always Democrat. Why is that? I don't think they know. So we're moving up. Moving on up. Which among other things provides their tribal governments shall continue 8 years from March 4th, 1898. So this was in 1899, I believe. So they had 1883, which was the first one. Okay, in administering Indian Territory affairs under the Curtis Act during the past year, many questions have arisen and few decisions have been made. All Indian Territory matters have been placed under the immediate supervisory control of the inspector, right? Except those under control of the Dawes Commission. A number of mining leases have been made in the Indian Territory for asphalt, coal, etc. Royalties, and this is something you guys need to pay attention to, on coal and asphalt and the Cherokee and Creek nations are now collected by the United States agent. White residents. And I'll wait for you guys to really catch up this. I'm going to repeat this. Royalties on coal and asphalt in the Cherokee and Creek nations are now collected by the United States agent. All right. White residents are also taxed for the benefit of the nation for the privilege of doing business in that territory and to carry on their vocation. The privilege of doing business in the territory and to carry on their vocations. Excuse me, not vocations. That means lawyers, physicians, and others taking ground that the imposition of tax on their business by tribal authorities had become invalid, but a decision has been rendered against them and established the validity of such taxation by the tribes. Boom. Drop the mic. Okay. You know what that means, so-called black men? They don't want you knowing history. Because Indian setting up a 7-Eleven in your tribal land or area has to pay you. A doctor that's white that sets up a medical office has to pay you. A lawyer that actually sets up on different land that was treaty to you, that was breached with treaty, has to pay you. Okay? They have to pay you. If they set up a 10-story or 50-story skyscraper, they have to pay you. You are the one they have to pay. It's your land. And once you know that, so-called black man, and you start learning your tribal history, and you get your identification, and you go through different nations where you find your genealogy and history, then you get to tax them. And this is something they don't want you to know. They can't operate untaxable on your land. I don't care what the profession is. They can be a veterinarian. They got to pay you. It's yours. They're on your stuff. And this is why they don't want you knowing this. They owe you. They can't look down, oh, look at these so-called black people, these so-called American Indians. They just can't. No, you got to pay them. You have to pay those people. And they don't want to do that. And they want to bury this so deep so they can keep you where you're at. So the arrogant, smug looks that they may have will change once they come into the realization they owe you. You don't owe them. So they'll start saying, oh, well, you're going to have to move the stores somewhere else off their land. Where you going to move it to? Can't move it in New York City. Okay, that's breach treaties and agreements. Can't move there. Okay, where you going to move it to? You're going to move it to where? I don't know. Move it to New Mexico, well, you got to pay New Mexicans that were part of those tribes down there. Can't do that. All right, so they owe you. They owe you. So they set up an electrical company, a coal mining company. You're supposed to get a percentage. So-called black man. You're taxing them. They can't tax you. You're taxing them. This is what they don't want you to know. This is why they don't want you searching your genealogy and doing your historical research and background. Because they owe you. They got to return that money from Freedmen Bank that they actually took during World War II to help fund the war. They don't want to do that because they have to return it with interest. They have to return the money they took from the postal savings system. And they have to return the money from returns that they make from coal, electrical, natural gas. Look, that's your lands. You can say, look, I want my cut. They're going to huff and puff. I don't know. That agreement was so long ago. Yeah, but hey, the Assistant Attorney General for the Interior Department, including the Dawes Commission, with the different tribes, registered and unregistered, you got to pay what you owe. They don't want you knowing this. That means you get a cut. So if an American corporation, let's say they make $16 billion a year just on coal mining, they got to pay you and the different tribal memberships 10, 20%. What's 10, 20%? 16 billion. It's 1.6, 2 billion. That's spread across. Let's say fishing. Let's say you guys just fishing in the Gulf. You Louisiana brothers and Texas brothers. They got to pay you guys a percentage of what they take out the ocean and can and produce. They got to pay you a percentage. Let's say they make 100 million. No, not 100 million. Let's say they make 2 billion. They got to pay you 200 million, 300 million. They got to pay, they get it from your hunting grounds and your fishing grounds. They establish licensing in the Midwest to actually get fish. You got to get a hunting license. Stupidity. Absolute stupidity. And guess what? Oh, you got a hunting license? White people go fish? And black people too? All right. That generates 50 million. We want 5. See how that works? Let's say, there's lodges and lounges near lake towns and golf courses, and they charge $100 million for membership and fees and stuff like that. All right, you want to have here? Give us 10 million. What? We don't want membership here at this golf course. We want 10 million. We're taxing. Oh, okay. So you want to open up this healthcare company here? All right. Good to know. You're a physician, right? Okay. $70 billion. That's what you're generating this year? Oh, we want 7. Maybe 10. We'll take 10. And they'll say, oh, well, we already pay taxes to the American government. So what's that got to do with us? This is our land. You're leasing it. You're on it. You got this business. You can't operate here without paying us. And that is what they don't want you to know. That's the nail in the coffin. This right here. That's what they don't want you to know. So the second you stop saying you're black, which is a misnomer, or African American, and you stop connecting to different Kabbalistic or Egyptian mystery school systems and things of that nature, and you start saying what you really are by doing research and find your family ancestry and things of that nature, and you stop regurgitating different things that really don't connect with you, that's what they're going to fear. They don't really fear all those other groups, things of that nature. And this actually goes into the Mohawk Conference as pertains to the Indian. And I'll actually take you back to that page in a second. So this is from Jiba. All right. Let's see what it says. Let's go up to the top. But mind you, they owe you. You don't owe them. They got to start breaking off bread to you. You taxing them. As they say, I'm taxing you. Okay, let's go up to the top. All right. So let's see. Scroll up. Okay, so this it's just a short. This is not like a long article, but it breaks down. It's like a summation of what it is. So let's go to the top. Let's go to the top. Let's go to the top. Okay. So, why are you taking so long to go to the top? Wealthy people often feel that they know what's best for poor people. From 1883 through 1916, a small group of wealthy philanthropists, often referred themselves to Friends of the Indians, okay, met annually to discuss American Indian policies. As wealthy men, they had access to Congress, to president, and to high-ranking members of the government. This meant that their recommendations carried more weight than that of their Indian leaders. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The ideal of having an annual meeting to discuss Indian affairs, then make recommendations to the government, was initially the ideal of Albert K. Smiley. He owned the Mohawk, hotel, if I can remember straight. So he was a board member of the Indian Commission, and he was a part owner of the Lake Mohawk Lodge. Excuse me. The annual meeting took place and was called the Lake Mohawk Conference. So this came around the time you had the Mohawk Conference and the American Negro, the Negro problem. Okay. So remember that was the first video. You guys want to check that out? You can go back and look at that. Okay. In general, the conference envisioned the transformation of Indians from savages to citizens by three means: breaking up the reservation,
in high trade in various times in colonial histories in such cities as Albany, New York, Charleston, South Carolina, Detroit, Michigan, and Montreal, Canada, which began as a trading post. The search for force contributed mightily to further European expansion in Indian territory. Even in the emerging global economy, Indians fulfilled a role that ultimately played the preconceived notions Europeans held about them. So, the development of an arms race made warfare in Indian County far more dangerous and deadly. Even Indian agriculture was undermined by entire communities shifting their focus to gathering and preparing for hides. But most drastic impact came from the fur trade commodity, alcohol. Alcohol unleashed its ravage amongst Indian County. In 1689, Britain and France embarked in a series of wars that culminated in 1815 defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte at Waterloo, and all parts of those that saw an American theater. All right. So you talk about the King James Wars. The nations that found themselves occupying lands between those claimed by France and those claimed by Britain were in most precarious situations, forced to play two powers against one another. The Abenakis of northern Maine and Iroquois of upstate New York were forced to balance their desire with those of European colonizers. Europeans in the battles with Indians as a result of the shifting alliances and nearly endemic warfare, Indian County had been left broken and battered. Okay, so they stopped gathering food and they were engaging in wars, blah, blah, blah. Okay, many Shawnees migrated from their Ohio lands in 1690s, resulted in the increased warfare with the Iroquois. The Shawnees moved to the southeast, especially Kentucky, and developed close relationships with Creeks. The Shawnees' relationship with Creeks brought them into close contact with British leaders, British traders. With a new trading partner, the Shawnees felt prepared to regain their vacant Ohio River Valley homelands. However, by the middle of the 18th century, Ohio County had been virtually a battleground for the home of displaced Delaware Mingos and other groups seeking to reprieve their European wars of supremacy. Some tribes split their European alliances. New communities formed as militants from various tribes joined forces to form multi-tribal groups. Okay, the stereotype of the warlike and savage Indians were left to pick up the pieces of their broken communities and seek peace with
security in new areas. Securities of the Ohio Valley River were short-lived, and colonial rivalries spilled into that region. Was known as the French-Indian War. Later became the 7-Year War. The battle for the Ohio Valley started in early at 1753 when the French began building programs that would end with a string of forts across the valley. Britain sent troops and colonial Minutemen to drive the French out of these western backyards. Under the command of General Edward Braddock, the British moved to destroy the newly built French outposts. All right. They were routed by a small French battalion and a score of Indian allies. Unable to stop the building of the French forts, the British embarked on a global campaign, taking the fight to France wherever it held colonies. As early as 1758, British Peace Commission met with the Ohio Valley Indians. The result were often less than peaceful. British hoped to secure it. The Ohio Indians were not immune to British peace overtures. Okay, so the land siege took Quebec and gained control of the American coastline. Therefore, France was unable to supply its remaining Western Indian allies. And then you had the beginning of the Indian-French Wars, and Indians of Ohio Valley sought out the British and made peace. As long as the Britain and France remained rival power, they weren't really rivals. Most of them worked together in order to take land, and this was mostly theater. Okay, Indians could diplomatically negotiate a secure homeland for themselves. In 1763, drew close. Indian peoples lived in the New World. France, in the great counterbalance of England, was gone from America. The most damaging result of the years of perpetual war was taking captive both Indians, and they put them in slavery, and Europeans, Indians, and carrying out their traditional mourning wars, carried away captives and adopted them into their societies, made them slaves, or murdered them in retribution for tribal losses. The slaves were marched east, usually to Charleston, where they were sold to Southern gentry or shipped off to work on Caribbean plantations. The most dramatic captivity was taken of white captives by Indian raiders. Stories of Indian captivity, like that of Mary Jensen and Williams family, have been recorded with historians. All right. Women and children were more likely to remain with their captors, while men were frequently killed or bartered. Both male and female were returned to Anglo society. Those who returned to colonial society did not always do so happily. Colonel Henry Bouquet, really defeated the force of Ohio Valley Indians in 1793. He demanded that all white captives be turned over to his force. Although many of the tribes relented, they remained. Bouquet, the captives not turned over, although white, were bound to their Indian families. Many of the captives grudgingly accomplished the Swiss mercenary back across the Appalachian Mountains. Those captives who returned to Bouquet either successfully escaped or suffered the harsh reality of life they once knew was forever gone. Indian nations once allied with French were forced to come to new trade terms with the House of Hanover. And further the west, the Spanish held territories. Indian life changed as the Bourbon dynasty ascended to the Spanish throne and brought enlightenment in the areas of bureaucracy and Spanish imperial politics. Seeking to avoid conflict with the Indians, the King of England proclaimed in 1763 that the summits of Appalachian Mountains, this is interesting, this is where I want to go, would form the western end of British settlement. So you guys see App State plays football. Shouts out to Appalachian State where they went over to Texas A&M, you know, and they almost beat another team a couple of weeks ago, North Carolina. Almost got them. But shouts out to that win. Like Washington served a series of protest claims the king had overstepped his authority, of course, and the lands of the Ohio Valley belonged to the colonies by the right of conquest and able to control the colonial British settlements spilled into the valley. The proclamation of 1763 proved to be the first of many attempts by the British to control the colonies, which the colonists ultimately answered with revolution. British royal authorities had no intention of keeping their colonial countrymen out of Ohio country. Rather, British agents like Sir William Johnson attempted to negotiate land sales from the Indians to gain clear title of the lands. The violence that the British negotiators were supposed to avoid erupted in 1763, when Ottawa leader Pontiac launched a surprise attack on Fort Detroit. Pontiac's attack on the British outpost signaled a larger action, and the Indians across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley united against the British. Okay, and they joined with the French. No, they united against the British. This is an interesting history because you had the war that occurred with Tecumseh, and he was betrayed by the British. He was supposed to back them up. And again, the British and French always had this handshake deal, this little handshake, I got you, you got me deal. Let's screw over the Indians. And, you know, they eventually didn't back them up. And Tecumseh, and you go over to Detroit, look at the map, look right across the Detroit River to Canada, you see Tecumseh, a city, whole city named Tecumseh. So, although historians had given Pontiac credit for starting a general uprising among the Ohio Indians, the facts remain Pontiac's actions were decidedly local. His focus remained the besiege of Fort Detroit. However, a generalized Indian uprising went underway. The Indian warriors destroyed numerous forts and countless settlements, and what has become one of the most famous Indian movements in American history. To halt the warfare that raged on the frontier, British General Sir Geoffrey Amherst, like Amherst College, ordered Bouquet to distribute smallpox-infested blankets to those Indians who sought peace. Yeah, there you go. When the tribes of Ohio Valley were subdued by Pontiac's siege, proved unsuccessful, the British attempted to return the policy of negotiating land sales. In 1768, Sir William Johnson met with a delegation of Iroquois Confederacy, or Fort Stanwix, and there was a Stanwix War also. Through diplomacy, cunning, the Iroquois sold huge tracts of land south of the Ohio River, modern Kentucky, and Tennessee, to the British, despite the fact that the Shawnees and Cherokees both claimed the territory. How can one person sell something that they don't own? Well, we call that huckstering. Iroquois diplomats once again diverted the attention of a European power from their territory in New York to other less attractive territories. With the sale of Kentucky, a huge hole was torn in the Indian lands of the Ohio Valley. The numerous settlers poured into the region. Sure, the British possessed the title of the new lands. They paid no attention to the claims of Shawnees and Cherokees. As more settlers entered into the region, new conflicts developed. The rush of settlers in Kentucky turned the region into a dark, bloody ground. Lord Dunmore War, named after the governor of Virginia, erupted in Shawnees attempted to stop English migration to the lands. Okay. Point Pleasant in modern-day West Virginia, the Shawnees were forced to accept the English Kentucky-Ohio River as the southern boundary of their lands. The American Revolution, and this is it. I'm not going any further. Let's check the comments. All right. So the American Revolution split Indian nations the same way the war split Britain from its colonies. In Indian country, both Americans and Britons sought allies. For most Indian peoples, the events surrounding the revolution were comparable to a family struggle. Indians, people fought along the British. Indians recognized that they should fight to retain Indian independence was to the side of the crown. The American Revolution brought civil wars and destruction to Indian nations. Ignoring the teachings of the Negawi, the Iroquois Confederacy split. The Oneidas, the Tuscaroras sided with the Americans. The Mohawks, Odigas, Coyuas, and Senecas supported the British. Which is why you always have the Mohawk Conference, all right? Because they supported the British, and it is what it is. Iroquois warriors killed each other in battle. All right. Iroquois refugees sought help from Fort Niagara. American soldiers marching with the Sullivan wrote accounts of fertile lands available in upstate New York. Among the Cherokee, warriors ignored tribal elders and attempted to use American Revolution to expel Americans from their territory. In retaliation, American troops burned entire Cherokee towns and forced numerous land ceding treaties upon the defeated Indians. Now, the Cherokees mostly were matriarchal, so when they burned their towns, they mostly burnt their crops, actually, not their towns for the most part, because I don't want to go into that. In the Ohio Valley, most matriarchal clans usually are farming. They're not hunter-gatherers like that. Indians found themselves pulled by the competing sides. The British at Fort Detroit and Americans at Fort Pitt. Shawnee and Delaware chiefs proved neutral, but efforts proved futile as the war spilled over in the Ohio Valley once again. The Delawares signed a treaty with Americans in 1787, but a massacre peacefully assembling at the Gnade Gunaton led the nation into British arms. If I mispronounced that, you guys can, let me know in the comments. Show me how to pronounce that. I don't know how to do that. The Shawnee tried to remain neutral until Chief Cornstalk was killed under a flag of truce in 1777. In 1782, Shawnee warriors alongside British regulars attacked Kentucky militiamen like Daniel Moon. In 1783, Britain recognized American independence in the Treaty of Paris. Britain ceded all territory north of Florida south of the Great Lakes and east of the Mississippi River to a new nation. Despite promises of the contrary, the Crown abandoned its Indian allies. There you go. Who were not involved with the treaty negotiations to the Americas. For the part of the Americans viewed all Indians as defeated people and began the process of securing title of Indian lands by right of conquest. Just 1 year later, the Indian delegation visited the Spanish governor of St. Louis and complained that the American sovereignty meant continued death and destruction for the Indians. In the series of treaties, Fort Stanwix, Fort McIntosh, and Fort Finney, Indians recognized the American nation ceded huge parcels of land in exchange for newly born United States. No longer able to play competing powers against one another, Indians were forced to negotiate with new nations. The new nation regarded its existence and expansion as inevitable and divinely ordained. As a result, war and treaty-making endeavors came to define the relation between the United States and Indian nations. Indian nations stood in opposition to stated policy of the United States to give up the lands, for doing so would diminish tribal land, traditional activities, and reduce available sources. Okay. Okay, and so this talks about different divine interventions, how they would use religion and their religious beliefs to garner troops and movements. So this discusses, he was spiritually led different Native American troops and different Native American leaders and things of that nature. This is what that goes into. Okay, so U.S. Army St. Clair suffered 600 dead and 300 wounded in a time when military power of the nation was at its lowest. So Little Turtle has successfully defended Indian lands in the valley. Okay, so this book goes into a lot of stuff. It talks about, so I'm not going into that, I might go into that some other day. But the good thing about this book, I think this is it talks about this is in the Trans-Appalachian region. Indians face further encroachment on their lands from hunters and squatters, despite the Treaty of Greenville. In the Indians' mind, the United States could not control their own citizens. Upset by the destruction of their old ways of life, frustrated by the failures of the federal policy, and angered over increased use of alcohol among the people, some of the Indian leaders sought to get solace in religious movements. The Senecas of New York and Shawnees of Ohio Valley were among the first to feel the effects of such movements. The Senecas, known as Handsome Lake, half-brother of Corn Planter, led a religious movement designated to return the Senecas to their position of prominence in New York. In a number of visions, Handsome Lake claimed that he received divine inspiration. He ordered them to renounce Christianity and any other religion, and they blurted that out. The Senecas must revive their traditional ways, even while adopting some aspects of white culture. The Longhouse religion, the Handsome Lake movement, became known to attract a large number of convents and provide viable alternate to total assimilation of being pushed by United States. Okay. The younger brother Tecumseh developed a religion that sought not to cooperation with whites and demanded that Indians return to the national ways. Now, some of these religious visions and prophets and movements did not succeed. Quite a bit of them didn't. Often they ended in abandonment and failure. Okay. So this discusses many of the different aspects of what occurred before the Civil War. This is interesting, but let me show you guys how it breaks down, because I don't really feel like going on that. But there was wars going on during the Civil War. But this book is good, and I want you guys, I'll leave this in the description. All right, go on now. Shoot. Because it actually has definitions. What are you doing? Okay, there it is. So this is a dictionary. So it has all sorts of different things that you can actually use. This is a good reference book. So if you want to know about, okay, let's go, for instance, I don't want to go here. Okay, so you want to look up different things. It has a list of different definitions that you can actually look up. Okay, so this is really good dictionary. So I'm through. All right, it's we're coming up on a 2-hour mark. I do not want to go that long. I only want to go 20 minutes. The thing did shut off a little bit. So let's see. I didn't use all my banners. I might have to delete some of these. But you guys pretty much will get the gist of it. So you had the let's go through some of these in the last minute. You had the Tuscarora War, North Carolina. They were so-called black. All right. And they will often depict them much lighter. Don't fall for the cap. You had the Cherokee Nation expel so-called black tribal members in 2007 from the tribal rolls. This was done so they can actually deny many of you so-called black men, hello to you black men that are Cherokees, OCO, deny them aspects of land and opportunities. All right. Now, you did have some so-called blacks that were in bondage, and some were just tribesmen, and they never were in bondage. Some were actually the slave owners. Okay. Choctaw Nation, which I haven't got that book yet. I'll go review that some other time. So we just reviewed the Historical Dictionary of Native American Movements. That's by Raymond Wilson. You guys go check that book out. You had chapter 6 of American Indians, and we only went through that chapter, but there's far more in there. And if you guys want me to go deeper into that book, we will. Do you consider me a native? That was the first thing we discussed with Isabel Jensen, and she was from NASA, and she's had so-called black natives that went to San Diego State, and the conflict that San Diego State University and UCSD has with different tribes in that area because of their destruction of burial land, and they not going to that school intentionally. Then you have the Ohio Valley Native American Speak by Paul Rene Tambora. Okay. And then you also have the Mohawk Conference and Indian tribes, and I don't have that up there, but this really was only supposed to be an hour. It really should have been done a little bit earlier. You guys enjoy the rest of the game. It's 2:30. I'm out. Peace, brothers. Keep your heads up. And greetings to all my great brethren, if I didn't say that before. And let's go back. Hide that. I'm out.